Hey, segment one. Let me go into full screen. Okay, segment one of event 201. This was all planned, okay? It was meant to affect only underdeveloped countries. It didn't happen as they had planned it. Everything was scripted down from the media, spreading the information, talking about internet shutdown, social media platforms shutting down a certain social media platform. It's crazy, okay? It's ridiculous. It was all planned. That's all I'm saying. Okay, now to start the video. By the way, it was this video was uploaded November 4th, 2019, okay? November 4th, 2019, way ahead of the pandemic, right?
Hello everyone, I'm Anita Cicero, Deputy Director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, and today I will be your Master of Ceremonies for Event 201. On behalf of our center and our partners, the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to our audience here in New York, as well as our larger virtual audience participating online today. The goal of the Event 201 exercise is to illustrate the potential consequences of a pandemic and the kinds of societal and economic challenges it would pose. The scenario also highlights the very critical role that global business and public-private partnerships play in preparing for and responding to pandemics. Today's scenario is going to simulate meetings of a multi-stakeholder
Simulate.
called the
Did you hear that
Pandemic
word?
Emergency Board. This board has been urgently convened by the World Economic Forum, and Johns Hopkins has been asked
The Devil's
to monitor the
Economic
board
Forum.
meetings and provide expertise during the board's deliberations. The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society. The board's recommendations are aimed at top decision makers in national governments, global business, and international organizations. In this scenario, Tom Inglesby, the director of the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, will be chairing the board and serving as the moderator for its discussions. Today's exercise will simulate 4 meetings of the Pandemic Emergency Board, and each meeting will be devoted to one key topic. Each meeting will start with a video and a briefing that will provide the information needed for the board members to engage. Please note, this is not a test of any particular person, organization, or nation. The participants are all playing as themselves. That is, senior business executives, NGO leaders, and government officials. They're not expected to be pandemic experts. We've really asked them to participate based on their own expertise and their best professional judgment. With the exception of Tom Inglesby, none of the participants know any of the details about how the exercise will unfold.
Exercise.
The Event 201 scenario is fictional, but it's based on
Fictional.
health principles, epidemiologic modeling, and assessment of past outbreaks. In other words, we've created a pandemic that could realistically occur.
Created
And
a
for
pandemic.
those interested in our assumptions, we will have a lot of the background research of the scenario publicly available on our Event 201 website at the conclusion of the exercise. The policy discussions, the challenges to be discussed in this exercise represent controversial, high-stakes issues that would require high-level input from business and government leaders. So just a few housekeeping notes before we get started. For our in-person audience, please do silence all your electronic devices, but you may tweet at #event201. We're going to have a 15-minute break.
You can look it up for yourselves.
So please try to confine your calls.
I took a screenshot just in case they take that down.
Because the event is being video recorded and live streamed, we ask that you remain quiet as much as possible and avoid moving around during the exercise. The exercise is going to end at 12:30, and there'll be a luncheon in the cotillion room, to which you are all invited. As you know, there's also an online virtual Event 201 exercise that's happening simultaneously. And for those of you online, and I understand there are hundreds of you, you will be seeing the same news videos and briefings as we do here in New York. But you will
Let me
engage in
pause
your
this
own
and
online
forward a little
discussion,
bit.
Of the topics, and the pacing of the deliberations will be the same, both online and in the room. So, as you can see on this slide, we have an outstanding group of global leaders playing the role of the Pandemic Emergency Board members here in New York. And with that, let's welcome our participants and invite them into the room. Tom Inglesby from Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, Latoya Abbott, Marriott International, Sophia Borges, UN Foundation, Brad Connett, Henry Schein, Chris Elias, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation,
The
Tim
Devil's
Evans,
Foundation.
formerly of the World Bank, George Gao from China CDC, Avril Haines, former Deputy U.S. National Security Advisor, Jane Hulton, ANZ Bank, and former secretaries of both the Department of Health and Finance in Australia, Matthew Harrington from Edelman, Martin Knuckle from Lufthansa Group, Eduardo Martinez, UPS Foundation, Stephen Redd from US CDC, Adrian Thomas from Johnson & Johnson, and Hasti Taghi from NBC Universal Media, and Lavin Theroux from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Welcome. And before we begin the exercise, I also want to introduce Ryan Morehart, who's lead of the Global Health Security Group at the World Economic Forum, and he will say a few words. Ryan.
Thank you, Anita, and good morning and welcome again on behalf of the Center for Health Security, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and the World Economic Forum. Welcome to Event 201. 201. Throughout our session today, I hope that number will represent two dimensions of our work to strengthen global health security. First, today, there are 200 epidemic events every year, and it hasn't always been this way. The number is increasing, driven by globalization, climate change, urbanization, deforestation, and other trends of our modern world. In other words, we're in a new era of epidemic risk.
New era.
And the second dimension is that one of these days, one of these epidemic events will be a pandemic.
Will be.
And mitigating risk and impact of that pandemic
All planned,
will
remember.
require an all-hands-on-deck approach. And we know from past responses that public-private cooperation will be essential. We also know from these responses that there are some bright spots when it comes to public-private cooperation, but some real critical challenges remain. But there's every reason for us to work together to address these challenges. For one, it turns out that at $570 billion annualized, the annualized risk posed by pandemics is on par and rivals with climate change, which means that the pandemic risk to lives and livelihoods is at a level that governments and the world's biggest businesses can no longer afford to ignore. And we are counting on this conversation today to inform our work together to improve our collective preparedness and to protect lives and livelihoods from pandemics. And to provide further context, I'm very pleased to introduce a short video now from Dr. Mike Ryan, the Executive Director at WHO and the head of WHO's emergency program. So with that, we'll turn to a video.
False flag. Another false flag. Everything was planned. For all false flags are planned. They're planned ahead of time.
Greetings, distinguished guests, and thank you for this opportunity to say a few words
Looks like the
at
devil.
this year's event, 201, the high-level simulation exercise.
Simulation exercise.
Hosted by Johns Hopkins London Centre for Health Security, the World Economic Forum, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation.
Two devils.
Unfortunately, I was not able to join you today.
How convenient.
Involved in the IHR Emergency Committee for Ebola, but I had hoped to be in the room with you because the issues you will be dealing with over the next hours may be tabletop exercises today, but they address real and critical threats which we at WHO take very seriously. Without a question, epidemic risk has become a global strategic concern. I don't think we've ever been in a situation where we have had to respond to so many health emergencies at once. This is the new normal. I don't expect the frequency of these epidemics to reduce.
Hear that, new normal?
Vulnerabilities all
You
over
probably heard that a lot in media if you watch the news. New normal, new normal, new normal.
driven by many factors, mainly through human work. Adopted by WHO member states in 2011. WHO has secured 400 million vaccine doses for influenza, 10 million antiviral treatments, and 250,000 diagnostic kits for the
Vaccines, hear that?
We have completed external evaluations of surveillance and response systems in over 100 countries and carried out more than 50 simulation exercises. Looking for vulnerabilities and weaknesses in national systems. This voluntary, collaborative, multi-sectoral process helps countries to assess their capacities and identifies the most critical gaps within their health systems in order to prioritize opportunities for enhanced preparedness and response. The Pandemic Supply Chain Network, part of the Epidemic Readiness Accelerator, which is a project of the World Economic Forum in partnership with many, including WHO. It's a public-private collaboration to develop a globally connected supply chain that can support health emergency operations during a pandemic. Stakeholders consist of product manufacturers to logistics providers, distributors, and UN partners, including ourselves. Michael Griffin is WHO's focal point for the Pandemic Supply Chain Network, and he is there with you this week. Constant innovation and the use of cutting-edge technology.
I'm going to pause this for a minute and forward it.
Including ourselves. Michael Griffin is WHO's focal point for the Pandemic Supply Chain Network, and he is there with you this week. Constant innovation and the use of cutting-edge technology is key to pandemic preparedness. In order to pool data and analytics at a global scale for disease prevention, the EpiBrain Initiative, a global data ecosystem, aims to build a collaboration of big data networks to understand and predict epidemics. It supports data science, innovation for outbreak preparedness and response. Despite this progress, there is still much to be done. Cross-sectoral simulation exercises, such as the one you will be experiencing today, contribute to a better
simulation
understanding
exercise.
of critical gaps, the cooperation required from global businesses, response decisions required from government and public health leaders to minimize large-scale economic and societal consequences of a severe pandemic. I wish you the best of luck, and we are looking forward to working with each of you to strengthen pandemic preparedness in the future. Thank you.
And our thanks to Dr. Ryan. And with that, here in New York and online, welcome to Event 201.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Gradually, farmers started getting sick. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. At first, the spread was limited to those with close contacts, healthcare personnel, co-workers, and families. But now, it's spreading rapidly throughout local communities. International travel has turned local epidemics into a pandemic spanning the globe. Just 3 months ago, CAP started in South America, but has now reached several countries with more than 30,000 cases and nearly 2,000 deaths.
Good morning, and thank you all for being part of this Pandemic Emergency Board. We're at the start of what's looking like it will be a severe pandemic. And there are problems emerging that can only be solved by global business and governments working together. The global community has been working to respond to this pandemic since its recognition. But as health and economic impacts have become more severe, the World Economic Forum has convened this board because of your combined expertise, your backgrounds, and your global voice. We will need all of you to help us respond to urgent policy crises that are emerging. The purpose of this board is to advise leaders in national governments, global business, and international organizations on the response to the pandemic, particularly focused on international problems that require collaboration between business and government. Your recommendations will be critical and will be promulgated and communicated broadly at the end of this meeting. On the left screen, as we have this meeting, you will find a dashboard of information about the pandemic that will help us in our conversations. As important background for this discussion, we want to start the meeting by viewing this news story that just aired on Global News Network.
Keep in mind, this is an exercise, a simulation, okay?
Continuing our coverage of the newly discovered CAPS disease and the scope of its deadly outbreak.
They call it CAPS,
There are now more than 30,000 reported cases.
but they're calling it
Experts
COVID-19
warn
now.
This may be just the beginning of a global problem. GNN science reporters have produced a video about what we know so far about CAPS, the virus, the outbreak, and the
CAPS.
resulting cases.
COVID-19, COVID-19,
CAPS is a
coronavirus.
novel coronavirus related to those viruses that caused the frightening SARS epidemic in 2003 and the deadly MERS outbreaks in recent years. Scientists think each infected person in turn infects on average 2 more people. This disease is proving more transmissible than SARS or MERS and about as contagious as influenza. Essentially, the cumulative number of cases is doubling every week. At this rate, we can expect to see 16 times as many cases in a month unless we find a way to interrupt transmission. The virus appears to be spreading rapidly in densely populated and impoverished neighborhoods.
Impoverished.
In megacities in South America. CAPS is a serious respiratory.
That was their
disease. More
intention.
than half of the recognized cases have required hospital care, creating a huge
Should have been
strain
only
on
impoverished
health
countries, but that's not the case.
is
It
about
backfired.
50%. For comparison, CAPS is about as lethal as SARS and 2 to 4 times more lethal than the 19
CAPS, aka COVID-19, coronavirus. Pay attention.
So, some people only exhibit mild flu-like symptoms, not requiring treatment in a hospital. Alarmingly,
All
those people are able
simulated.
to walk around and spread the virus, not realizing they are doing so. Even worse, international travelers have been arriving at their destinations symptom-free, but within a matter of hours, becoming ill. Travel-related cases have blossomed into outbreaks in a number of locations and have quickly grown faster than health authorities.
Keep in mind,
responded
all
to
this
change.
took place before the
In
virus
other places,
outbreak,
physicians
okay?
have quickly recognized the symptoms of CAPS.
This is a simulation. Even the news broadcast right here is a simulation.
For now, global public health experts are very concerned about this disease because it appears the virus is readily transmitted through the air from person to person. Essentially, all people are susceptible.
CAPS is COVID-19, by the way, because this is a simulation.
It could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere. Models developed by leading public health authorities indicate a CAPS pandemic could lead to an outcome worse than the 1918 influenza, which killed 50 to 100 million people worldwide. Given the global population is 4 times larger than it was in 1918, if these models prove accurate, we could be looking at hundreds of millions of deaths over the next year or 2.
Okay, now we're going to get a briefing on the numbers and distribution of cases by Dr. Caitlin Rivers.
As you've just heard, the outbreak is very worrisome. The vast majority of cases are occurring in Brazil and other South American countries. However, as you can see,
That was their intention
there has been some
originally.
spread to Portugal, the continental United States, and mainland China. Our models project that with continued spread in Latin America and predicted spread to additional countries, we could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread. That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases. We are also tracking financial markets as an indicator of the economic impacts of caps. While markets are down worldwide in the past couple of weeks, they are still positive for the year.
They're using COVID-19 to kill the market.
Emerging policy crisis for which we need this board's recommendations.
That's going to be their excuse for the financial
Medical
collapse.
countermeasures.
All planned.
By medical countermeasures, we mean vaccines, drugs, and diagnostics and other medical supplies.
When the country was already in debt.
The CAPS pandemic. I know we would all agree that if we had a vaccine in hand for CAPS,
Vaccine, hear that?
vaccine experts say a vaccine in the near term is highly unlikely. But there is an antiviral that does look like it will work. And to understand that better, we're going to watch one more clip here.
Continuing our CAPS disease coverage and possible solutions, I'm joined by immunologist Dr. Yvonne Bello and Dr. Rhea Blakey, an epidemiologist, both highly respected in their fields. Let's get right to it. Why are people saying a vaccine for the CAPS virus is not likely in the near term?
Researchers are working on a vaccine.
They're working on a vaccine.
But it's complicated. We have known about CAPS-like viruses in animals and people for decades, but have not been successful at developing a licensed vaccine. I'm sure there are new technologies that may help, but it's going to be difficult.
Yeah, right.
I am not optimistic about having a vaccine in time to be relevant during this pandemic. Even if we discover a good vaccine candidate, we're starting from scratch, and it takes time to test safety and efficacy, typically years. So even if testing moves quickly, global manufacturing will still need to be established. Again, multiple hurdles.
We simply cannot rely on these old timelines and processes. This is a crisis. We have to move beyond these issues.
Notice they use copper-colored people as epidemiologists.
Resources, this can happen. Also, keep in mind, we need effective treatments sooner rather than later. Extranavir is an antiviral drug. Scientists have told me this could be effective. We need to start treating people immediately.
While I agree Extranavir does look promising, it's currently used for treating HIV. However, it's not manufactured on the scale needed for treating this many people. And will we just stop using it for HIV treatments? How will we get this drug in the quantities needed? Who decides who has priority for the limited amounts we do have?
Sick motherfuckers, I tell you.
Doctor, in my opinion, you are lost in the details. With enough money and political will, anything is possible. Let's get going on this now.
Thank you both for this extremely important discussion. Our U.S. affiliate has just released polling results.
All of this was
public
planned.
expectations for a vaccine. A majority of Americans expect
All a simulation,
available
all right?
in 2 months,
This is a
and
simulation.
65% of those polled are eager to take the vaccine, even if it's experimental.
Vaccine.
In related news, a significant demand for personal protective equipment like N95 masks and gloves are on the
See?
rise due to the pandemic.
It was all planned.
Hospitals are low. Additionally, other critical medical supplies such as saline and antibiotics are dwindling. Countries and companies are reportedly stockpiling supplies, disrupting healthcare supply chains, causing dangerous shortages in many parts of the world.
And finally, for the latest information on what we know about vaccines and this antiviral,
Vaccines.
here's medical countermeasure expert Matt Walker.
Sick, sick, sick.
As we've just heard, there is no existing vaccine that appears effective against the newly discovered CAPS virus. Governments,
COVID-19, by the
scientists,
way.
and companies
It's a
around
simulation.
the world have become working intensively to
Code
develop
word
one,
is
but it's
COVID-19.
highly unlikely that a vaccine could be developed.
In the beginning of the video, they showed you
manufactured and
Corona.
distributed in less than a year, and it's likely to take much longer. While there have been efforts to develop vaccines against SARS and MERS coronaviruses, none have
They
been
just
licensed.
mentioned it.
And given the distinctions in the CAPS virus, vaccines against those diseases would not be effective for CAPS. The antiviral drug Extranavir has demonstrated some efficacy against the CAPS virus. It reduces the severity of illness and saves lives in those who are infected, but does not prevent infection like a vaccine would. Extranavir is a generic drug primarily used to treat HIV.
Yeah,
manufactured
the
in 5
vaccine is meant to
countries,
interrupt your
the United
DNA,
States and China.
stop you from becoming who you are.
Approximately 1 million people take Extranavir every day for HIV. If all of those HIV patients could be switched to other antiretroviral drugs, we could potentially free up enough Extranavir to treat 26 million CAPS patients.
Listen, you could go online and do the research for yourself. Event 201, okay? I did a screen cap of the text, and I'm saving it just in case I remove it. But anyway, you can look for yourself. It's called Event 201. It's a simulation. Everything about COVID-19 was planned ahead of time. Another false flag, people. And out. 9:13.